Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Valora Washington, and it is my pleasure to invite you here with us today to the CAYL Catalyst series. We are the community advocates for young learners. It is really a pleasure to have you here with us, an honor for you to be here with us today. And we are here to offer you timely, relevant, and immediately actionable topics of interest that relate to young children and the people who teach them. We really appreciate you joining our webinar series today. And as we start this year, we've been having a series called ECE Pride, where we really are reaching out to practitioners, administrators, and advocates. We're coming together as a community to think about the big picture and what is really important to us in the world today. We offer this webinar series without charge or cost to participants so that it is accessible to the field's practitioners, and it is recorded so that it is available to people who are with children right now who would like to hear from it. If you'd like to listen to any of our webinars, please go to our website where you can listen to all of them without charge. For the past few months, we've been focusing on ECE Pride. Pride in the difference we make in the world, pride because of the impact we have on children, families, and communities. So, right now, just take a moment and write in the chat. Are you ready to channel our early childhood education pride into advocacy as we get ready for social change? And exactly how can we do this? So we know that the ability to take pride in your own work is a hallmark of sanity. This is what the poet Nikki Giovanni has taught us. We also know that we're not here merely to make a living. We're here to enrich the world, and we impoverish ourselves if we forget that. But at the same time that we're doing all of this, we think about how we can really have an even deeper impact, how we turn our pride into the things that we need as a profession. We're really emphasizing impact because we know as educators, if there's any one message that has emerged from decades of research and experience, it is this, that as a nation, we have moved from believing more than we know about child development to an entirely new phase. And that is right now, we know so much more than we're actually doing for children. In other words, the opportunities that we offer to our youngest children lag far behind the science. We know that the benefits of early childhood education accrue not only to the child, but to our nation as a whole. And when we don't take action, it has consequences. So when you compare the United States to comparable nations, we see that we have fallen well below international norms in how well we support children and families. Research also shows that parenting is a happier and more deeply supported activity in other countries. And our relatively low investments result in greater infant mortality and achievement gaps that start early and they just get worse over time. But as citizens and educators, we can change this downward trajectory. We can be architects of change for the next generation of children and families and for the staff who work with them. But to do this, we have to realize that childhood has changed, families have changed, and the mix of people in our nation has changed too. When we recognize all of these differences, we as a community face choices about our possible futures. We can look at the gap between science, practice, and policy, and we can decide to be game changers. We can be architects of change. Albert Einstein said that in the middle of difficulty lies opportunity. How can we take advantage of the opportunities we have today? Well, we certainly can't predict the future, but we can invent it and we can grow into our future possibilities. So we begin by acknowledging that early childhood education has complex adaptive challenges and many, many leadership choices to be made. And in order to understand where the field has been, where we are now, and where we're going, we need to get up on the balcony in the language of Ron Heifetz and Marty Linsky. And so we need to think about how we can create this change. And we face the reality that we've been around this block before. So as historians, we know that the United States once had a pretty universal system of childcare in 1943. The Senate passed the first and thus far the only national childcare program during the war. But guess what? when the war was over, all of those centers closed. So, our urgent call now is to deal with the challenge so we don't keep repeating this history, this historical cycle. We can address the root causes of our challenge and create a different reality. And the time is now to do that because we have so much evidence. The evidence is historical, it's scientific, it's social, it's economic, it's educational. So let's come together and think about how we can be architects of change. What are the steps that we actually need to take? And the CAYL Institute has written a book about this that we ask you to enjoy. But at the same time, today we want to invite you to listen to three people in our community who can really share with us how we can take action for children to create social change. So we're really thrilled to bring you people today who've been on the front lines of advocacy, advocating for substantial change for children and families in our workforce. And the first person that we have to speak with us today is Adele Robinson. Yes, that is the Adele Robinson. She is now a principal associate with Apt Associates. She led NAEYC's public policy division for 15 very productive years. She was a leading advisor to Congress and the administration of the Child Care and Development Block Grant, Head Start and Higher Education Act, Early Learning Challenge Grant, and a lot of various federal funding. There is no one better prepared to give us a historical understanding of our advocacy stance than Adele Robinson. She's going to be followed by my good friend, Francia Winsinski. I'm proud to say he's a former CAYL Fellow who now serves as a membership coordinator for the National Association of Family Child Care. She is a former elected official. She's been very active in local government. Let's hear what she has to say. And finally, we're going to hear from Amy O'Leary, quite the advocate in the state of Massachusetts. She's also former president of the NAEYC Board of Director. She is executive director of Strategies for Children in Massachusetts. And so I think with Adele, Francia, and Amy, we can learn a lot about how to get organized for social change. So join us as we hear from these three experts. I want to advise you that this webinar will be recorded as usual and closed captioning is available. Near the end of the webinar, you will get an email link, a link in the chat that will connect you to a Q&A session if you want to interact with our panelists or ask them a question or share your point of view. Please continue to write in the chat throughout this webinar. We'll be looking at your questions as we have the conversation today. And be sure to look for the link in the chat if you want to join the Q&A session. So let's show our pride and get organized for social change. What can practitioners do? How do we reach out to legislators? What can we do as citizens? How do we address social change from the stance of the policies and practice and research that we have? Let's learn from our panel and let's get organized for social change. I'll start by asking Adele. Adele, welcome to the CAYL Catalyst. We're so thrilled to have you here today. I just love if you would share with us some ideas and experiences you've had working for many, many years in the advocacy space. Welcome, Adele.
Hi, it's so great to be here, and I'm so lucky to be here with Amy and Francia, who are carrying the torch forward, both in the state and national levels. So I hope you can hear me, see me. I'm going to do a look back because, as many people would say, you have to sort of know where you're coming from. In this case, it's less about what have been the big success stories as what has been the change in the way we've approached social change for early childhood education. So I'm going to start at a period of time some of you may not have even been with us, before emails, before Twitter, before Facebook and social media. And although Head Start's been doing this work of advocacy and grow your own advocates for a very long time, I'm going to start with 1990 and the passage of the Child Care and Development Block Grant. And what I think is really important about that milestone, not just for what it's done for access to affordable childcare, but it also was a period of time when there were very few groups who were actively engaged in early childhood particularly childcare. Certainly in DC, there were just a few groups, there were some advocates in the field, but it was a very small number of people who were really focused on early childhood. There was a lot more focused on nutrition, housing, other fields. And I think the passage of that bill and the need to sustain it and annually try and get more money into it really spurred much more activity in how do we build first our grassroots, but also more organizations taking on this charge. But even then it was really different. It was, when we talk about relationship based in early childhood, I think of that in terms of our advocacy work then. I can remember Helen Blank standing outside of the door of the Appropriations Conference Room in 1991. There was a proposed cut to the new Child Care and Development Block Grant funding, and she stood outside that door waiting for me. I was a Senate staffer at the time with that committee. Every single day for 3 weeks. We were one of the last of the decisions made by the committee. And we don't do as much of that anymore because we have a lot of technology. We really relied on faxes and phone trees, mainly phone trees. And so you can think about the pace of advocacy was really different, the ability to react. But it also had some issues of barriers to participation. You needed a fax machine. You needed to have access to a phone during your workday, and most people didn't have that. It's not like carrying around your personal iPhone. So in a way, we were sort of self-limited by the technology at the time. On the other hand, I would say that the lack of technology had some pluses as well. We weren't so reliant on just quickly sending out an email or a Twitter storm. We had to think of ways to really feel present in a very physical sort of way. So for instance, it was at an NEYC annual conference, and we were trying to suspend this assessment of children under Head Start. It was called the National Reporting System. And we collected handwritten petition signatures to Congress. And I faxed it to certain congressional offices, and it was hundreds of pages, and it meant shutting down their fax machine for hours. They had to pay attention to us. It was the same thing with the phone calls we would do, which we could still do now, where we got to the point of a groundswell where people were walking through their congressional offices, the staff going, why are the phones ringing so much? And even on occasion, the Capitol switchboard would really just sort of cry uncle. And so we had a real physical presence, and people really knew we were there. And I think now with technology, it's easier to be active, but on the receiving end, we have to worry more that we're really getting through, as they say. There's some intern or very junior person who's manning the emails. There are thousands and thousands of issues that are emailing at the same time. How do we get so that we can maximize technology that we have today, but not lose sight of those relationships, which we ourselves know are so important? I do think that one of the hurdles that we've done really well in overcoming, that when I started at NEYC, there were a lot of myths that nonprofits, Head Start's childcare, even affiliates of NEYC, couldn't engage in advocacy. And we spent a lot of time really being intentional about training people about what they could do in advocacy, what they could do in lobbying, that these are things not only legal to do, but should be done. And so it was actually sort of freeing for people that we really took the time and did those trainings. And now we're into electoral advocacy, understanding what you can do without being partisan, that can perhaps put better policymakers in front of decisions for childcare and Head Start and pre-K and our compensation. We started doing more intentional trainings at our conferences separately. I remember Deborah Stark and I wrote a book that a lot of community colleges picked up so that people would feel comfortable. It's a different language. It's the legislative process or the regulatory process. And there are all these terms, whether it's federal or state, that are different from the terms we use in early childhood. And so getting people comfortable, and then we started things like the Policy Forum and NACRA, which is now Child Care Aware, would send people to the Hill. And we found ways of getting people engaged in ways where they felt supported, mentored, and empowered in the end. I mean, one of my best memories of working at NAYC was every year, people who had never done this before coming back from their congressional offices and saying, wow, I really couldn't get over how well they listened to me. I really feel like I was an expert in the room. I can do this again. I'm making a relationship, and just the glow on people's faces. And I think that you'll hear from Amy and Francia that we've done that much more exponentially. We started seeing more college degree programs in early childhood add an advocacy course, or at least included in leadership. We're now seeing whole degrees and certificate programs in higher education on early childhood policy, including an advocacy syllabus. So we're really, I think, thinking about our pathway into almost professional advocacy more than we used to, when it was really, oh, there are those people who do it full time, and then there's the sort of grassroots support. I also think we've come a long way since the beginning, when there wasn't as much foundation support monetarily for advocacy. Foundations themselves were a little skittish about what about advocacy work, what about lobbying work could they fund? And I think they've gotten much more embracing of this work and the need for money. I mean, we are not able to self-fund our advocacy the way big pharma is and the banking industry is. We're really dependent on foundations, and they really stood up a lot of the advocacy efforts. State pre-K expansion is tied to some extent to a 10-year advocacy funded set of work by the Pew Foundation. We had worthy wage campaigns, but now we have a whole early educator investment collaborative of funders to really push advocacy on compensation and other workforce issues. And to some extent, funders have shifted a little from general support also to helping to set the agenda, prenatal to 3 and other issues. And so now there's a better marriage, I think, that is helping to push some of our advocacy forward differently than where we were before. I do want to acknowledge that we've been very white tables. A lot of the full-time advocates have been white women with very committed focus to equity, both for children and families and the early childhood profession. But we've been doing a better job, I think, lately of really having a more diverse advocacy table. And so I turn to Francia to pick it up from here and take us to today.
Adele, thank you so much for your remarks. I really enjoyed them, and I appreciate, and also thank you, CAYL, for having us on this webinar. I appreciate your story of with the historical perspective, and especially remembering my days of the fax machine with the dotted paper that you needed to manual feed. And also this bring me later to issues of like the importance of supporting technical assistance for people in the field. Also, I love your place of that early childhood education is not partisan. So I'm starting today with also in the continuation of that historical perspective where I have come from. So it is important for all of us to find common grounds and common roots with our stories that connect us further by telling each other our own stories. You know, all of us in these professions have different life-changing moments and experiences that brought us forward or bring us here together in why we do this, you know, what are our values and vision for a field that we know is gonna really change communities. So I'm recalling my early 2000s when I was carrying my first baby on my back while I was working at a food pantry. I have a, you know, great opportunity to converse with various humans, you know, coming through that door about community issues about families looking for places to interact with other families. They will ask me if I knew about childcare spots open in our beloved community, if I have the bus schedule, or if I knew about an opportunity for housing. I really enjoy, communicating with neighbors. I met many families and caregivers through that experience. This experience was really foundational to my commitment for education and equity, and for the values that continue driving my thinking and action for the years to follow. So when people ask me, what have been your hero that inspired you? That's where I come from. It has not been one hero, but the multiple people who've been in those experiences. Raising children and being around children in a community really help us to understand what are the issues that families are facing, what are the policies that are affecting families in this set of needs in early childhood education, help us to understand how to partner with each other, and really help us to know what inclusion and diversity we need to level up a collective experience for families and caregivers. So often, as I go through this career, we have to find our center. What is the purpose of education? And I will take it further. What is the purpose of early childhood education, right? So we come to say, with the North Star of, this is to support building foundational skills from prenatal. Depends on where you are. It will be preschool or kindergarten, but we know learning start in the prenatal stage, that will enable humans to develop their full potential and to become successful members of society to achieve their own success. We have learned through history from many of our errors, and we keep moving forward. And we take every moment that we have as an opportunity. So all of this is to do the social change and radical transformation of the early childhood education systems. And we hear the common trends and the common words. We need to continue supporting a diverse workforce that centers women, especially because this is a field dominated for women of color, and individuals with diversity. We need to continue supporting that this field becomes in continuous well-resourced. We need a force with autonomy, not empowerment. I always, that work, is a star, but, is the autonomy that we allow people to share power. We need families to continue having options from a plethora of opportunities that they are served in their foundational education of their children, where their needs, their culture, their preference. And we need, again, to continue what we hear, not just even having a seat at the table, but building those tables and open wide those seats for higher collaboration and communications. So through our field, we hear, for social change, we have to acknowledge what have been our big challenges. So we, as we heard Adele saying, we are trying to work in this sector to be more equitable, and to have families to access programs. The cost for early childhood education is still high for families and working families, and that means families who are facing poverty are still needing to have better access to these programs. Educators in early childhood, we know firsthand that innovation is happening, and we need to keep and that this field is the driving economy for sustainability of any community. But we need to also bring equitable living wages, healthcare, retirement benefits for our early childhood educators. So we know that this will enhance the reinforcing conditions to have better support for families and children. We also know that educators are, working not just daycare. It's working also non-traditional hours that allow families to go safe, happy at work, knowing that the children are safe. Also that the families like to be in settings that represent their language and culture. And in the pandemic, we learned that we are among the, that this field is among the country's most essential workers. And so we need to make sure that, the local policymakers continue understanding that this is the foundational piece that will bring society together. We need also to keep changing the narrative. And I want to talk here about family childcare educators, especially home family childcare. There is a division and discrepancy that brings family childcare as a business model, and that recognize only childcare centers of the quality place for early childhood is both. We also have family friend and neighbors, and we need to know that both are strong economic business models, and both are quality at the quality that also works for the family childcare educators, and not just as an age trimming work that is defined by others but not from the field. Nationally, we also need to continue talking about the need to share data and continue, this is where the innovation happens, support reliable, and share data that inform the changes in the field. So we have, these are some of the things that we know we're lagging behind, but we are excited to know that we have made substantial leaps of progress in these chronic issues, and that we're focusing on hubs. So a while back, I have an opportunity to work with CAYL and also be an architect of change, and really to survey and understand, our systems, and to know how we really keep focusing the experience of the educators, of focus on equity, to leverage the field, understanding that really the peer support and enabling educators to support each other is what grows the collective professional capacity, and to lead for better outcomes for the educators themselves and for children they care for. That coming together as organized in one voice and mobilize brings the political influence. We are the political influence right now, and we'll also continue building to build that influence and encourage share power. And the investment, in asking our policymakers to continue investing in the workforce will always result in better compensation, and building the pipeline of educators that have left the sector, that we know since 2005 we have a big decline, and we need to continue building the support of family childcare educators. We need to build collaborative ecosystems to reduce duplicative efforts, educators working with advocates, policymakers, funders, and nonprofits. And the formula is really simple. We know that if we have a strong infrastructure, we know that by ensuring adequate funding for support, our system will be sustained over time. We know that right now the government have provided incentives for both educators and parents, and we know that already has been working, especially for children that has been disadvantaged in our communities. We also know that communication with everybody who is part of this ecosystem will help to ensure that we have a responsive system that functions effectively. We know that engaging families that are in our systems is the way in which we know how are we doing and how can we better our two-way communication systems. And I will say our other lesson will be that we always have to work in how to coordinate systems. Right now, we have multiple ways of, our educators get caught in different duplicative opportunities. So we need to talk to each other and offer meaningful support in one way, in one voice, offer tangible incentives again, and make sure that we have adequate capacities for continue supporting the people in our field. So, great things that has happened is that right now FMLA, the Family Medical Leave Act, is nationally strong. This is a great success that also our families can take that benefit. And Also, another piece that is working great is the opportunity for universal income and guaranteed income. So we're also allowing our educators and families to have a regular payment with no strings attached and no work requirements, to really to help build a robust floor for families and communities, and also to keep continuing on the values of trust and respect for people, with commitment to freedom and choice and dignity for families, to reduce poverty. So these are all big lifts for our field. And the child tax credits that happened within the last couple of years, really, in terms of data, pulled 3.7 million of children out of poverty and reduce child poverty by about 30%. So, these are some of the great areas of focus that we can continue. So, I want to leave you with a few thoughts. One is that, please continue the encouragement to build bold actions with local democracy. If somebody here is, join your local school boards, your local city councils, that can be a great national strategy for alignment. We need to understand our data, and we need to continue supporting our networks of educators in the field, so they feel seen, heard, and as a sector. And we need to continue building spaces with early childhood education to gain feedback, to have a greater impact. And lastly, the support for mental health for educators is critical in our sector. So continuation with advocacy works. I'm proud and happy to support my colleague, Amy O'Leary, the Executive Director of Strategies for Children, a longtime friend and partner in advocacy. So Amy, I pass it to you now to keep our story.
Thanks so much, Francia, and to Adele, who came first, and to Valora and her team at CAYL for putting not just this webinar, but the series of webinars together to really highlight, bring together folks for these conversations that we know are only an hour and go by so fast, but grateful to have the time together with you today. And I feel like I have an easy job following Adele and Francia, who laid out the foundation and kind of the nitty gritty of all the important work that's happening right now. We know that one of our greatest opportunities for our field is also one of our greatest challenges. Our rich, long history serving children and families in so many different and important ways can sometimes be an obstacle as we try to move forward. We need to honor the past, but also push ourselves to think boldly about the future and think about what could be, and not just focus on what has already been. We need to believe in ourselves and be willing to think differently about the future. As early childhood leaders, we are committed to reflection and transparency. We celebrate collective successes, and equally important, we acknowledge our gaps and growth opportunities. We have a strong history of leading complex conversations and implementing innovative solutions. And now it's our time to use all that we have learned and take action to be the advocates that the children, families, and educators need right now. Over the last 30 years as a preschool teacher, a center director, an advocate, a registered lobbyist, an adjunct faculty member, an executive director, and an early childhood cheerleader, I have witnessed incredible personal and professional transformations in early educators as they come to recognize and claim the power that they have as advocates and experts in the field. I have had incredible mentors in my life. Find mentors who will support you, challenge you, teach you, create opportunities for you, make room at the table for you, believe in you, and help you find your voice. Think about who made room for you at the table. Who encouraged your leadership? Everyone could name someone that encouraged them, mentored them, or pushed them to believe in themselves. So be that someone for someone else. As early childhood professionals, we are often underestimated and undervalued. But this is a story I believe that we can and we must change. If I could spend every day with early educators facilitating advocacy 101 workshops and classes, I would do it. It doesn't matter if it would be in a 1-hour webinar, a 2-hour conference, or a 15-week semester undergrad or grad students, count me in. At Strategies for Children, we have a long history of working on high quality early education and care. Over the past 2 years, we've stepped into more of a convening role, first with our 9:30 call and more recently with the early childhood agenda. In many ways, the 9:30 call has changed the way we do our work and heavily informed our design for the early childhood agenda. And I hope we have some 9:30 callers on here today. In the first few days of the pandemic, we launched this daily advocacy call 5 days a week for the early childhood community. In an ever-changing context, it was essential that people who are closest to children and families and the work had a direct line to both each other and to decision makers across the state. It was during these initial months that we started to see an increased need for opportunity for cross-sector collaboration, because we know that children and families do not live in the funding streams that we have artificially created for them. There were many moments of frustration as we said to ourselves, why isn't this policy aligned with that policy or with the reality that families are facing every day? The 9:30 call also served as an orientation, as for mapping programs, services, and building an understanding of the entire early childhood world and figuring out and demonstrating how everything fits together. Last week, we celebrated our 3rd year anniversary of the 9:30 call, and we know we've had over 630 Zoom calls with 400 speakers, including many people who spoke during updates from the field. These firsthand reports of what was happening in the field, about an issue people wanted to talk about together, or just a good news story that people wanted to share have been some of the most powerful calls we have had. The COVID-19 pandemic shined an important light on our early childhood ecosystem in Massachusetts and across the country. And it really has created opportunities for systematic change. As we know, and we keep hearing, the research tells us that early childhood, prenatally through age 8, is a critical time of development. At the same time, we have not historically seen this importance reflected in investments or the programs available to serve children and families. If you think about our 9:30 call experience and fast forward a few months during our strategic planning process, we wanted to focus in on a need to create space for the early childhood community to work across sectors for better policy development. We needed to stay up to date on each other's work and provide opportunities for connection and collaboration where it made most sense. To elevate the voices of those closest to the work because they are best positioned to make recommendations that will lead to meaningful and sustained change. One of my biggest lessons learned has been around unfiltered advocacy. COVID allowed for authentic and raw advocacy. There was not time for sanitizing real life experience into polished talking points for elected officials. We didn't have the energy to do that, but we also saw a shift in the effectiveness of our advocacy. Together, this unfiltered version was more powerful. Advocates also feel more prepared to be authentic because of the various leadership opportunities available to them. We are able to learn and teach together around things like the state budget, around federal policies, around the stimulus dollars, around the day-to-day policies that we first put in place for emergency childcare, and then thinking about which of those policies need to continue as we move through the pandemic. And so the early childhood agenda really brings people together for people who care about our youngest children. It's been a space for the early childhood community to work across health, housing, business, transportation, education, and more in the pursuit of equitable and impact-driven solutions. We know that this cross-sector collaboration is important because children's issues are interconnected. So after an intense content and context packed 3-month facilitated process working with thousands of partners, together we identified 10 priorities for the early childhood community. We are looking forward to the next phase where we are going to work together to advance these recommendations until they are a reality. We really relied on the values that we created for the agenda, which were rooted in evidence-based solutions, advancing diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, elevating and centering voices, and professionalization. One thing that we have learned at Strategies for Children is we are not community organizers, but organizers of community. We see our role as convener and one of many content experts in this space. We also know that we were focused on effective strategies for supporting leadership. And this culture of continuous improvement is something we have certainly adopted. We don't have everything figured out. We are, as they say, building the plane while flying it. We have worked to be transparent and inclusive, and sometimes we know it's messy, but the transparent and inclusion support has really led to better policy design. It also has helped foster an environment of trust. The one protocol that we have used consistently has been around elevating voices, and it was about naming ourselves a 1, 2, or 3, being clear about 1s work every day with children and families, 2s sometimes work with children and families directly, and 3s don't directly work with young children and families, but have a vested interest. This protocol allowed us for voices to be raised and prioritized as we thought about opportunities to make policy. We also know that the early childhood agenda relied on many different internships, networks, fellowships, credentials, PD trainings, higher education degree programs, and leadership opportunities. We know that we need to build a system that starts for people as they're thinking about this as a career, moving through higher education, and really thinking about how we can work together on this larger area of early childhood. Strategies for Children also has recently, in the last 3 years, created an advocacy network, giving folks an opportunity for a year-long experience from across the state of Massachusetts to come together to learn more about Advocacy 101, think about issues that are important to them, and ways that we can work together on projects and practice as folks are learning new skills. We also have this co-learning approach that we are creating these opportunities to learn together. We want to share the microphone with partners. The 930 call has been a really good opportunity to put this in practice. We also now are recording presentations as we think about things that connect back to the early childhood agenda. So folks who can't join us live can have the resources available to them. When we first started with the early childhood agenda, our beloved facilitator, Mo Barboza, asked if we could create a community online. And we believe that we could because of all we learned through the 930 call. We also created our 930 call at night, which we had every other week at 8 p.m. to make sure that people could participate. If they couldn't join us at 9:30 in the morning, could join us at 8 p.m. at night. We also have thinking for this phase is about kind of this balance of in-person and virtual opportunities, and thinking about language access and financial support. We acknowledge the time and effort that it takes to attend meetings and to take on more of a leadership role. But we also acknowledge the implications that financial support can mean for public benefits and taxes. So we want to make sure that we are acknowledging this and financially supporting people's time, while also not contributing to any cliff effects, as we know that that is some area of policy that we are very worried about. We also want to provide transportation and interpretation with materials and meetings. So we all need to learn our skills and have opportunities to practice. We need to stay current with early childhood policy, and we need to think about opportunities to learn along the way. We need mentors, and we need you. And at the root of this is you, it's us. Our energy and enthusiasm are what make this work possible and what can help bring our shared vision of high quality early childhood experiences closer to be a reality. So ask yourself, who are you waiting for? Remember that sometimes we can be our own worst enemies when we think that we don't know enough, or when we convince ourselves that somebody else will do the advocating or fighting. Today is the day, the time is now, and you are the right person to do this work. We need you to be bold, effective, thoughtful advocates. If not you, if not us, then who? And now we're going to join the group for a discussion.
Wow, I am so inspired by the three of you. I'm ready to just start calling some members of Congress right now. Okay, so Adele, Francia, just please join us. I'm so excited with what the three of you have shared. And Adele, your historical perspective of, how challenging it was in the past because of the lack of technology, the advantages and disadvantages of that. Francia, you didn't mention something that I know about you, which is you were an elected official. And one of the things that we always encourage as a strategy is for people in the early childhood field to run for office of various kinds. Tell me a little bit about how you started that journey of becoming an elected official and what that experience is like for you.
Thank you so much, Valora. And I will say, if somebody here in early childhood is running for office, please email me. I will do a donation. Personally, it's my pledge to all of you. I love to see people going in the field. Recently, I was in a conference for early childhood, and I saw a senator speaking, and I have a moment where I say, this really have to change. It cannot be anymore we advocating towards the change. We need to be that change. What I remember is that I see that was my baby story. Like, when you're a parent, a caregiver, you have your nieces and nephews, you really want them to have the best education. And really what's the thought about, getting involved is what changed this opportunity, and that I can do it. So what I remember is it was a February, it's a winter, and I was exploring some ideas to run for my local school board. And I remember people discouraging me, say, why are you gonna do that? It's volunteer, don't do it. And I just remember I started walking to town hall, got my papers, got my nomination papers. And since then, I really, it was great. I won, of course, 2 campaigns, and I moved from town. I'm still an elected official. I serve in a capacity of a commissioner on the status of women and girls for my region. I chair my finance committee in my local town, but I have found, especially for early childhood education, that this is a convener that everybody, no matter which political party you believe in, this is something that we have as a common ground. So, through these lenses, really building relationships, building a network with people who are policymakers and changes, and joining them has been really gratifying. So
All
please
right.
write to me if you're running for office. Thank you.
You heard it first here. If you're out there and you're running for office, Francia wants to give you a donation. So please, you'll be getting her email address in our follow-up email. And by the way, at the end of this conversation, please look in the chat so you can click the link and get into the conversation with Amy, Adele, and Francia. So watch that link. Amy, one of the things that I noticed and I have written about is how COVID mobilized the early childhood education field like never before. I have been extremely impressed. Why I think we first came together because it was a crisis and we were confused and we didn't know what to do, and the information was all over the place. And then after that, people start getting together talking about the strategy. So, you have played with this 9:30 call an amazing role in the state of Massachusetts that many people have looked to as a model. 3 years you have had this daily call of advocates who get on the phone for 30 minutes and share information. What a powerful force that has been. Tell us a little bit about some of the outcomes and the fruit of this effort that you're seeing in Massachusetts right now.
Thanks for that, Valora. And also the 9:30 call host and booking agent, we're always looking for talent. So if folks listening have an idea or an experience they want to share on the call, please get in touch. We'd love to have you on. I think that's it. I think this, it really was thinking about if you volunteer for a campaign, they have a daily check-in call. Let's just check in. And that's really what this was, a 30-minute, we all figured out our Zoom accounts and how to get on. But I think some of the outcomes include this unfiltered advocacy. It has really allowed me to be a more fierce advocate because I am hearing every day the same as everybody else, what's really going on. We're not waiting a month to have a meeting to talk about something. We can be a lot more proactive. I do think hearing from elected officials who have come on the call. We, after each election cycle in Massachusetts, we've had 2 elections for state legislature. We have had our first year tour on the 9:30 call. So 2 to 3 legislators have come on the call for a meet and greet. And what has been incredible is every single time a legislator comes on for that, they have a constituent on the call. So there's somebody there living in their district who can follow up, who can become that go-to person. And they're first-year legislators. So they are, we've also seen a shift in who's running for office in Massachusetts. So people are coming in with experience of working in a nonprofit or working on different issues. So that has been really exciting to see. I also think this opportunity, this I belong in these conversations with policymakers. We had Senator Elizabeth Warren on the 9:30 call. We've had U.S. Representative Catherine Clark. We've had state legislators. We've had mayors. We've had superintendents. And like I said, we've had members of our own field who have just been, those have been some of the most powerful calls. I think the other outcome is this shared trust that we have now. When we released the early childhood agenda at the State House, everybody knew each other from Zoom. And I didn't really think about this kind of virtual world meeting real world, but the fact that, you used to kind of go to your meetings, know the people in your circle, which is kind of how we operated. But to see a room full of people who already knew each other virtually really has changed the dynamic. And I think just one outcome that has some concrete numbers is we did a sign-on letter to support the operational grants in Massachusetts that we've had originally funded by COVID relief dollars, and now we are asking for the state to pick it up. And we had 181 organizations and 760 plus people sign on. So we have seen a huge increase in people's participation because I think they feel more informed, more connected, and more part of the conversations that are happening. So they're more willing to take action.
Yeah, I'm just so impressed with the unfiltered advocacy that has emerged. Adele, back in the day, we used to prepare talking points. We'd pass them out on a piece of paper, and we'd basically be sharing with people what the important points are. What this has evolved into in this next generation advocacy is exactly what people like Amy are leading us toward, which I think is very powerful as we move forward. I want to invite all of you to look in the chat and find the links so we can continue this conversation with our panelists as our time runs out. This is a real call for action. Although we're hearing from National Association of Family Child Care, we're hearing from Massachusetts and the work of Strategies for Children, we're hearing from Adele Robinson, and you will get all of their contact information and all of the resources that have been discussed today in the follow-up email that we send you on Monday. But in every state, there are comparable examples of this next level advocacy. And we encourage each of you, as Amy said, find a mentor, be the mentor, get involved. I know that a lot of this advocacy is uncompensated work that many of us are doing a lot of already. But if we're going to make the change for children and families, that's what we're going to have to do. In every single state, we need to follow the money. We need to know the power that we have and come together and get those allies working with us as we try to move forward together. I'm going to also, in closing here, invite all of you to continue to join us in our CAYL series. We are now wrapping up our ECE Pride series. We're going to have our next 3 months really focused on leadership dilemmas in the field of early childhood education. We're going to start next month by talking about how we can better leverage Latinx leadership. We just heard Adele talk about how the advocacy tables historically have been very white tables. And childhood has changed. Children have changed. The mix of people have changed. We know that the Latinx community is such a growing, important population in the early childhood space. How do we leverage Latinx leadership? Join us next month to hear from people to talk about that. Then Amy also referred to some of the fiscal cliff issues that are happening in Massachusetts and every single state. There is no state immune that in September 2024, lots of money is going to fall off the cliff if we don't take action now. How can we address this fiscal cliff issue right now and leverage the funding that we need? And then finally, that's going to be followed up with the leadership dilemma of how we really prepare and keep moving with the next generation of early childhood leadership. What some of the hopes that we see and some of the dilemmas. So join us in the next few months as we talk about these early childhood education leadership dilemmas. And now I want to invite you to join us in the conversation that we're going to have in the link where you can really interact with our speakers. On behalf of the entire CAYL Institute team, I want to thank you for joining us. Always thank you so much for joining us. These conversations are very important. Look for our follow-up email that you will get with email addresses and the resources that we've talked about today. I look forward to seeing you in the chat, in the conversation. Thank you so much for joining us today. Good night.